Is there in fact a boundary that's owned here? Again, what's that called again? Conservation easement. Does it apply to this piece of property along this highway?
Is your question, is there a conservation easement on this property?
That goes along here to the highway?
Not that I know of. We used to have a conservation easement on this property, but then when we bought the fee, it extinguishes a conservation easement.
So you rebought it?
We only owned the conservation easement. We didn't own, like when this was Rainbow Tree Nursery, they still owned it. We had a conservation easement on top of that.
When they bought it, it merged everything, so the conservation easement effectively goes away. The conservation easement effectively goes away when the holder, the responsible party, the store, buys the property.
Would that happen with anybody? Or just, I mean, it seems to me that a conservation easement, when it's sold, if I understand it correctly, stays with the property.
It does, if it's sold to another entity, but if the owner of the conservation easement purchases the fee, then it's all one ownership.
So if an individual bought this property and wanted to build a composting facility, would that be allowed under the conservation easement?
I don't think so. But I don't know, because we had never been there. And actually, my understanding is that previous owners had considered,
But they virtually paid $250,000 or whatever for it. So then when you bought it, I guess, I hope I'm not the only one that doesn't understand. Why is it null and void?
It's null and void because a conservation easement, well, I don't know if I can explain it perfectly, but a conservation easement is a third party or a second party that assures the original ownership abides by all the details of the conservation easement. And so if you're not a second party overseeing it, it's all one person. There's no one to oversee.
It's really confusing, huh?
Well, it's so let me say, so as I told you before, at another meeting, I'm not licensed to practice law anymore. I'm inactive, so the Colorado Supreme Court said I can't give legal advice, but hypothetically, there's a thing on the doctrine of merger. So when the holder of a conservation easement on this property, like Boulder County, acquires the underlying fee, the conservation easement and the fee, when they're combined in one entity, then the conservation easement goes away.
It was interesting when Rainbow Nursery was being sold, we were invited over to look at it, and in order to buy the property, which the water rights were stripped, you could only have, I believe it was 70 vehicle goes back and forth.
In and out.
In and out. And I would imagine they did that for safety, you think? So I wonder why, if Boulder County owns that now and was trying to sell it, why would that be any different than here for a traffic issue?
So my understanding is with the design of this that we do have to improve the access along 287.
What's the left out plan for full trucks?
Left out.
How would that work?
Left out into the cross and into the middle lane.
How much would a fully loaded compost truck weigh?
So it's like anything. The maximum is you can haul 25 ton plus your tear weight, so probably about 85,000 pounds.
What's the acceleration rate across a 65-mile-an-hour highway, 4 lanes, from a stop?
I can tell you how long it takes to compost, but I can't tell you how long it takes to.
So from an engineering standpoint, you guys must have looked at this. If this is your
There is a traffic engineer on board who will be completing a traffic engineering study.
Have you looked at that yet?
Excuse me?
Have you looked at that yet?
It's in progress, so it'll be submitted with the special use review that we submit to the county.
So is this plan then that's predicated on being able to take a left out with a full truck, 80,000 pounds, you're confident that with no signalized intersection, you'll be able to safely navigate across 2 lanes of highway into the high-speed lane on the opposite side, accelerating fast enough to not create a life safety issue?
If the traffic engineering report from our licensed traffic engineer says that it is, then we'll be confident on it.
Again, if that is not proven to be safe, we will have to re-examine our design.
Are you looking at other traffic patterns for vehicles, or is it predicated on the left out?
What do you mean by other?
Well, if you can't take a left out, you'd have to take a right, and a right to head south, right? So
Correct.
are you looking at alternate cycle routes, or is it just predicated on left out only?
Right now, the plan is to make a left out because we haven't had any indication from the traffic engineer that it's not okay. But like Andrew said, if it comes back where they say it's not okay, we'll look at something else, for sure.
One knock on that, you mentioned that the previous owner, Lawrence Fredericks, was interested in possibly doing compost out here. Is that something that he applied to the county for?
No, there was never any applications or anything like that.
Yeah, well, he passed away, so we can't ask him now.
Right.
I never, Anyway, just wondering if there's any paperwork on that, any paper trail. So that's just like a...
No, but like I said, we've never been through this process with a private.
No, I just didn't know how you heard that about Lauren. Was that something that he told you, or?
Wasn't directly to me. It was with another county staff. Again, it was
Got it.
hearsay.
Okay, no, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Lauren had a lot of ideas.
Right.
I should know about that. Have you heard
Well,
site plan and operations? But so if you got questions, it's
yeah, it kind of goes back to the parks and the land use. Someone made a comment about it earlier. There's a certain set of guidelines and rules that you have to follow, especially if you have a conservation easement. Now we understand that why there's not a conservation easement on the property. However, it's still some of the traffic patterns, the 70 in and outs. That was one of the things that was a restriction on that Cherry Creek nursery. There was another one that had restrictions on you had to have 90% of your product had to be grown or produced on site. And now we're talking about bringing all this stuff from all over the area, not just Boulder, here, selling it, hiring a third party to manage it, to make a for-profit, granted, to pay for it, but now you're in competition with the marketplace. You're not a quasi-government, semi-government, you're an actual government. And now you're in direct competition with the free market. I just want to understand that. Good intentions are good intentions, and ideals and visions, but we got to go back to the rules that were set out for all of us, and that's kind of what I want to understand. It's kind of confusing.
What defines agricultural use with the county? And where is that defined? Somewhere you have to have something that shows this is our definition of agricultural use. Where is that found?
It's found in the land use code. And the land use code, our former land use department is now called Community Permitting and Planning. And the codes are online.
It's still called the land use code within our system.
yeah.
We're going to maintain that for perpetuity.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The land use code, if you just Boulder County land use code, it's got a big old website that you can search through.
So composting facility is defined as agriculture, not just as an allowed use, but the definition.
This type of facility, particularly scale. That's a
I'm
question.
sorry, what was that? I cannot hear him. So you guys we're limited back here in what you guys are
Brandon
talking
asked the
about?
question about would this be an agricultural use composting, but I was asking qualifying that with a project of this scale with what's envisioned as proposed at this point. Does that meet the agriculture? Is that right, Brandon? Is that the question? Does that mean?
I think that
Well,
was
no,
just
I mean,
passing.
the conservation
I'm sorry.
easements, the conservation easements are held in perpetuity. And I understand that they're, should Boulder County exercise the first right of refusal and purchase that property, I understand that they're null and void, but there still is somewhere there, it must be defined, the specific agricultural use. So that's what I want. Do you have that here? I mean, can you pull that up? Can you read that? Because I understand that we can go look for that, but I think that needs to be provided to us because this was purchased with our dollars, and water rights were purchased with our dollars, and I want to know. I want to see that specifically, how you define that.
Yeah, so before we even started down this process, we had the exact same questions. We did not want to get to a point where, you know, our sustainability initiatives and our parks and open space are planning something that wouldn't meet land use code. So we consulted with our land use department, with our CPP department, and looked at what the code was, and we got basically, in reading it and our consult with the land use department, they said yes, it meets the agricultural use as defined in our county land use code. So you can proceed with investigating this.
So through the conservation easements, there was also Boulder and White Rock shares, as well as Colorado Big Thompson project units. Have you talked to Boulder and White Rock? Do the Boulder and White Rock shares, are they being able to be used still here? Where are you getting the water for the composting site? Is it left hand? Is it a combination?
So my understanding is we've looked at potentially using some of our agricultural water shares, but we are leaning now towards using municipal water here.
There were 8 CBT shares, I think, too, in the purchase. So,
Yeah, that's possible. I don't know the exact breakdown
so
of the
those
shares.
are still attached to the property? They've been sold off? You don't know?
They're
We,
still attached
Boulder
to the
County,
property.
Thank you.
we, Boulder County, still own all the agricultural water for it.
Okay.
We have not sold it, we haven't severed it, but as a county entity, and knowing that we have farmland, we have agricultural land that is owned and managed by open space, that can be, our water can be transferred downstream, basically,
And
to other lands,
I'm
other
sorry,
agricultural
I couldn't
lands.
hear before, so I'm sorry I confused your question.
No, I just wondered if you've already talked to Boulder and White Rock and talked about the Boulder and White Rock shares.
We don't have any intention of selling our shares. We will maintain them as county ownership and use them on county land.
So thank you for explaining how it goes from a Parks and Rec purchase from a code standpoint. But from a taxpayer, as was talked, and we're in election cycle too, if anybody's noticed. I'm happy to vote for increased tax revenues for parks and open space and green space, and I think I'm very supportive of that. How does the Parks Department use their budget for open space for an industrial complex?
So we are not using, that's a very good question. I think it's a very good question.
Was there a budget approval process done to purchase this unit?
So I think that's an excellent question. This is currently, it will not be owned by Parks and Open Space. We purchased it to begin with. We purchased the conservation easement. And then when the fee interest came up, to preserve all options, we purchased the fee. So that's what combined the whole thing. If this gets approved and we do composting here, this will become a county facility. It will not be, we will have to dispose of it for Parks and Open Space. And we'll have to go through all the legal ways of disposing this for Parks and Open Space. So there will definitely be a separation. Parks and Open Space is not going to be spending any money on this facility. It's all the funding for this is coming from your sales tax dollars that have started to be collected in 2020 from a sales tax that is for sustainability. And so it has, in our sustainability sales tax language, it outlined all the sorts of projects that the county, not Parks and Open Space, would work on, including zero waste, and did have composting and electrical improvements and assisting municipalities on their sustainability initiatives. So that's where the money is coming from to pay the consultants, and it would come from to actually construct and operate it. So it would not be
where
purchased.
that's a little bit tricky, right? Like you, instead of buying land you wanted to turn into a park, you bought this land with park money. And now you're going to sell it to the county for some future tax that didn't exist when you
Not only
bought
did
this
they do that,
land.
they facilitated it by rolling in.
So in the meantime, your money
easement.
did not go to buying a park, which it could have gone to. And so now we don't have a park with the money we gave to the Parks Department, and we have whatever this is instead.
But you
clarify-
will have the money that we spent on this to purchase more parks. The money.
you a hamburger today,
For a nickel on Tuesday.
But Therese, to clarify, the water though, the water's not as simple. The water cannot be transferred to Boulder County. The water will stay with Parks and Open Space. It has
Correct.
to.
Correct. So
that
when
needs to be
when the
pointed out.
transfer of the fee ownership leaves, well, and actually, in all honesty, I mean, I'll make it even more complicated. Even Parks and Open Space properties that we purchase, the money is actually, it's never this is a Parks and Open Space property. It's this is a county ownership for all the legal documents. Every land that we own is county owned. And then there's the subcategory of who manages it in the county. Is it the transportation department? Is it the parks department? Is it sustainability? I mean, so that's the difference. So it's really all county money, but it will no longer be, and yes, there will be money come back to Parks and Open Space so we can use the money that we use to purchase this, to purchase more open space. That is a guarantee, without a doubt. That
Do
will
we need
happen.
more open space?
I would say that there are some who think we do and some who think we don't. And we just passed a sales tax, again, that kicked in 2020 to purchase more open space and manage our open space.
Is that going to be
So-
for parks and recreational use, or is that going to be for future projects like this that we don't yet know about?
So our mission with Parks and Open Space is to preserve urban buffers, agricultural land, recreation, wildlife habitat. I mean, those are some of the main things. That's what we do, and that's what we've done for 45 years.
So is the preservation plan for this tree farm then to remove all of the trees?
No, our goal for how we manage this. So just a little history on the Rainbow Tree Nursery. What happened is this was all planted. They were selling trees out of it and everything. And then they went belly up. And so it was left to basically continue to grow. So these trees they're overgrown and not ideal for tearing out the trees and replanting them elsewhere. One of the reasons why we considered this as a potential for a composting site is because it has all these trees that can be used for sound break, but visual buffers, that sort of thing. Second, there's a lot of ash tree out here. Unfortunately, ash tree is being impacted by the emerald ash borer. So our goal is to come in and take all the ash tree out because we don't want to be a source of emerald ash borer for any other trees in this area. Our goal is to preserve as many of these trees that will survive as visual buffers, and even to plant some more, assuring that there's more visual buffers on the outskirts of it.
So would this facility accept ash wood from the rest of the county? Would it be trucked here?
I don't know if ash tree is accepted in the county yet.
Well, ash trees can't leave the county.
Right.
If
so
they're
if
cut down here, they have to stay in the
So
county.
if this then became the de facto processing center for ash trees, we're making the argument that we're cutting down the ash trees because we don't want to be a source of ash trees, but we're accepting the ash trees from around the county and trucking them in here.
But there wouldn't be a host tree for them. If a tree was cut down in Boulder and moved over here, and we don't have any ash trees in here, and there are emerald ash borers in them. As long as there isn't an ash tree here that they can move and become a host in, then you're not expanding their range.
And so since this won't be open space anymore and there's no restrictions effectively of the merger, so you talked about the trees and the sound break, but there's nothing binding in there to require you to keep any of this as it is, right? I mean, that's just kind of a picture.
Through our planning, through our CPP process, when this goes through community planning and permitting, they will assure that we have enough trees that provide adequate sound and visual barriers. So
trees don't create visual or the sound barrier thing. That's just not the way it works. I mean, you'd have to have a dome over the joint. No, we know this. Come on.
And according to the site map, I have a perfect view. My house sits right here. And I have a wonderful view of all this beautiful piles of shit.
There was a gentleman that wanted to build a hacienda, and that would be a lovely home, and there's a couple of us farm owners around here that actually have haciendas. Anyway, he was not allowed to do this because it would not go along with the neighborhood or whatever we are.
The culture of the
culture of
county.
the town. So I'm just curious, did you think a hacienda would have been a little better than this? Now what happened there?
So as land managers and as a county, we try to meet the needs of the entire county. And in doing so, we look at what our comprehensive plan says, what our other public processes have said, what our open space values are, what our sustainability values are. And I completely understand. Those of you living right next to it, it is going to be a change. What we are trying to do here is provide value for the entire community of Boulder and reduce impacts on neighbors as much as we can, which is why we have you out here to hear from you and talk about the visual screening or the sound or
the
I
odors,
think
or the particulates in the air for my 6-year-old asthmatic child, or the groundwater contamination for the stream that originates here that runs through my property. Yeah.
sure.
It runs through
I
all
hope,
of our properties.
Well, I hope
And our
what-
livestock,
Yes.
and then our plants, they use this water.
No, I certainly understand. What I hope Bob described and explained, I think he did a very good job, is that this is a self-contained unit and there's not going to be puffs of smoke coming and there's not going to be groundwater contamination. This is state-of-the-art composting facility to really minimize all of those negative impacts that neighbors would.
Minimize.
To
maybe.
minimize,
To what
yeah.
level?
Jurassic
what
Park
about the
pretty well
pests? I
contained.
mean, there's already, on all the open space land that Boulder County has, there's prairie dogs. I mean, my God, the pests are out of control. And that, I mean, what are you going to do about that? I mean, Teresa, I know where you live. You don't live in rural like what we do. You're in a neighborhood. For those of us that are here, those prairie dogs continue to encroach more and more. This is going to have a significant amount of pests. Rodents, what are you going to do about that? I mean, we're right there. We're probably closer than anybody. You guys don't take, I mean, no offense, but it's hard enough for you to control the pest control population on the open space that you do have. And so this is how are you going to manage that? And what are you going to do about that? Because right now we can't do much with the prairie dogs at all.
so
Well, hold on.
She's going to answer the question.
well, I've never run a composting facility, so I really don't know what kind of pests come from running a
The
composting.
regulations have very strict controls on what they on vectors. So we don't have vectors. That would be birds and mice and prairie dogs, I guess. And so
Rats.
You
Rats
guess or
and-
you know? But that's an important distinction. There's a lot of people who
Yeah,
want to
that's
like
at your
protect the
current
prairie rats
facility.
and you know, laws can change and now you're not allowed to touch them.
yeah,
To see Boulder
And they're
County's
in
got a
horse
pretty
pasture.
relaxed deal
yeah.
with prairie dogs.
I would, and I want to be honest with you. I mean, there are strict regulations on control of vectors. So the site has to be operated and to not create nuisance conditions. They're very tight. Odors, emissions. I mean, you can go to the state, that reference I told you about, and you'll see a lot of information on them. The vectors, for instance, one of the reasons I like this covered system is you don't have the bird issues, and you're inside a building with the other items, and you can control those environments. And so that's something as an operator I personally really like about this facility. Groundwater, all contact water, any contact that would be a pollutant to the groundwater is contained on concrete surfaces and contained and drained.
Where's the stormwater system?
I'm sorry?
Where's the local stormwater system?
The stormwater is down in the far corner where that pond is. So the same place that the groundwater, the same place it goes right now.
Yeah, onto my property.
So it's the same stormwater. It's the same
The
stormwater.
site would be designed by the civil engineers to control stormwater. And
Is it
keep
just gonna
on
evaporate?
And keep it on the site.
So evaporate? It's going to be like a big enough surface area pond that it'll evaporate? Or?
My only comment is it's the same stormwater that's falling on it now. I mean,
You get a lot more impervious surface here. You've got acres and acres of impervious.
I'm not gonna, I'm not the engineer, so I gotta stand
It's
my
not
lane.
running
And
through.
the oil and gas and
Right.
everything running into it.
I mean, there's 2, 4, 6. You got almost How many acres of impervious surface are we looking at here?
So the only additional impervious surface that's going to be introduced onto the site is in the grade.
So
So what you see in the
I thought
orange,
the bunkers were concrete.
so that all gets self-contained, and Bob was talking about how it gets collected into the tank that sits at the southeast corner, tanks that sit at the southeast corner. So that is not going to be reintroduced to the site, be collected and recycled.
It's gonna come south.
If needed, it'll be reintroduced into the process, and any excess would be taken off-site.
Okay, so it's not gonna go into the surface
it
drainage.
can't
go to the
All
stormwater.
self-contained.
The processed water from the composting process, those are all in the bunker system, which sits on a bed of concrete, and each bunker has a trench underneath, a drainage trench. All the excess water that comes off those piles is collected through the trenches by pumps into above ground tanks. Those tanks stay until they're full. Some of that water, as Bob said, is reintroduced to those piles to keep the moisture content where it needs to be. The rest is taken outside to wastewater treatment.
So your detention pond is only for
It's
surface
only
drainage?
surface water elsewhere on the site.
How
Not
much-
the
how
content,
much hauling
not
off-
the process water.
how much hauling off-site of water do you anticipate, and where would that go?
I don't think we're gonna have any, because we need the water.
Okay, he just said you're going to have.
If we
you're gonna
have
collect.
excess, it has to be hauled off-site and it'd have to go to treatment facility.
Okay, do you know which treatment facility would receive that?
Closest one. I mean,
Do we
you got
have?
one, you got one here and you got one there.
Right, we
in
have one up
county.
on 75th, but
Got 75th.
capacities are a question and planning for that. Can somebody get back to us on where that would go? That's an important question.
Access water.
We had a question over here first.
I have a concern about the bottom of the page where we talk about future. When this is approved, which we're assuming it will there be some restrictions as to the use of that future that concerns me? Because you're going to do traffic studies, you're going to do all this analysis based on the size of your existing plan. And my concern will be that traffic will double when you decide to make this larger, and it will not be part of this study initially. That's the way you go 1, 2, and the guy's down on the floor. So can there be a restriction on this land that is called future, that nothing will be built on it or constructed on it or any type of use similar to it being proposed?
I think that's a.
Do you want to
repeat the question?
How that's going to expand,
Future use of the facility,
future use.
expansion.
Future scary with the government.
So the idea for the future expansion is these bunkers that you see, labeled 1 through 16. If the facility sees success and the county wants to expand it, a mirror image of those 16 bunkers would happen where the current gray area is on the site at the northeast. That gray area would then move down to where it says future. So finished product, wood processing, you can see those same words appear down there at the south end of the site. So that's how the county envisions it potentially expanding in the future.
Why isn't that part? Will that be part of the traffic study now?
Right now, the traffic study is, as designed.
Because why? So you get a CDOT permit now, you're right in, right out. You're going to bring traffic around on 115th Street, because these truckers are not going to do what you think. We're going to have tremendous traffic in our neighborhood, and we need to give more notice than just the owners around here. I didn't get notice. I live on 115th Street, and this is going to create a tremendous amount of traffic on a dirt road. We got kids on there, we got animals.
We have houses close to the
It just
road.
needs to be done better. You need to show the whole friggin' thing if you're going to do a study, not just half of it. And you should, be up front. You weren't up, not you guys. I know you guys can do any of this. When we're frustrated at people who did this, which were the commission.
Let me chime in on that because I understand your question. I think when we get governmental approval of that plan, it will not be carte blanche to allow phase 2. It was just put on there as a FYI how it could fit on the land. If the county ever goes and asks for an expansion of the facility, we'd have to go through the whole process all over again.
Was it just like the way you just explained how you purchased the property with approval?
I didn't explain anything about purchase.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yes, sir.
We ought to all know what
Additional
you know
development
what
has
you're
to
gonna
go
do.
through a full land use process again.
Quick question.
What?
So what Andrew said is that any additional, so if an expansion was going to happen, since our study didn't include all that it would have to go through that again.
Go through development review, it'd go back through CDPHE, would probably go back through CDOT, everything. We're only planning for what we're building, what we plan to build, what we're proposing to build now.
Well, I think, swapping out the location of the bunkers, which is more the raw materials, more so than the finished product, and then swapping them to the area that you said is kind of like, oh, that's all the finished product, the benign stuff over here. I think that's a little shady too.
What if we as a community bought that parcel to put a conservation easement on it? For us.
Yeah, it's 3 separate parcels, isn't it, actually?
Yeah.
What if we bought that from the county? Parcel you're not going to use.
This one too.
I have to defer to the owners.
I think there's enough people here that we could take a serious offer.
And it's kind of a knock-on from that. I'm sorry, I'm standing way over here because I have a daughter with multiple sclerosis and her treatment.
Oh, I'm serious. I'm serious as a heart attack.
Yeah, and so, anyway, but that's not my question. I'm just explaining why I'm not hearing and interrupting people, and I apologize for that. But
who would we talk to about that? How would we
discussions
pursue that?
about this proposal and doing all of this, it would knock on to Victor's question is, has the issue of potential impact, like an inverse condemnation issue, come up in your discussions about the impacts of this facility on us neighboring properties? Is that something that you've all discussed?
What?
Did you say
Well,
nothing?
I'm wondering if the impacts of this are so bad that the county effectively is taking a use of our property. And I'm just wondering if the county's discussed that, the impacts and compensation and potential inverse condemnation.
And I had a related question to that too, when you were talking about wanting to do this project, or the county wanted to do it. Was this property looked at as an ideal location to build a facility like this as part of the desire? When the tree farm was operational, did you say, hey, 287 to 52 would be an ideal location for it? Or was it that the property was available at a good price and then we said, let's make it fit? Was it part of the master plan, the vision? Were you looking at other areas? I think somebody called it Recycled Row or something? Other areas that are built for that, industrial. Was there a study done on how Boulder County wants to take our tax dollars and build composting facilities, and what would the ideal location? I would think that the property value is a very, very, very small percentage of the overall cost of this project. So you're going to invest millions of dollars because of something that you happen to have in land, as opposed to saying it's a $100 million project. If we need to spend $20 million to buy the right land, it's a better thing to do than to say, let's shoehorn it into something else that we got at a fire site. In summary, did the county planning